Hello everyone, welcome to today's customer exclusive webinar, Mastering the Core Schema. My name is Katie and I will be your host during today's webinar presented by Bethany Maddox. We're excited to help you work through your mastery of the Core Schema. Bethany serves Vitech's customers primarily at the support desk as a customer care specialist. Between support cases, she manages the overall vision of customer care here at Vitech, developing instructional screencasts on various core and Genesis topics and elements of software documentation. She has often served as host, writer, and technical manager of countless webinars throughout her tenure at Vitech. Before Bethany gets started, I do have just a few housekeeping items. We will be answering questions today at the end of the presentation. Please send your questions in as soon as you think of them through the Question tab on your webinar control panel. The webinar is being recorded today, so if you experience any connection problems during the live presentation, you will be able to access the recording in the My Support area of the Vitech website. If you have any questions regarding the recording, please contact us by emailing support@vitechcorp.com. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Bethany. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi Katie, thank you for the introduction and thank you to everyone who joined us today. As the front line on our support desk, I do get a lot of questions about the core schema. For our webinar today, I've compiled the answers to a lot of those questions. I've also gone through our library of resources to compile all of those resources in this one place. You're going to get a rich set of information today, and I'm delighted to make this resource that pulls them all together. So let's dive in and discuss exactly what the schema is. The schema in Core is our implementation of the System Definition Language, or SDL. The SDL is a formal, structured language which avoids the ambiguity inherent in using common English to define a system. The precise meaning of each language concept is fixed and documented to enhance team communication and further to ensure an unambiguous interpretation of your project specifications. Now, the system definition language is an element relationship attribute language. And the entity relation language starts with classes, as you're seeing on screen here. Now, this is a subset of some classes. I took this picture out of our schema. It's important to note the interconnected nature of the schema. It's very easy to fall into a trap of viewing your model from the top down. So you might start thinking about it from, we have a document which traces to requirements, which might trace to your functions or your components. And while you may enter the data that way, the relationships among the data are actually extraordinarily interconnected. And so I show you this view just to remind you of that. Now, each class in the schema has been defined and documented for you. Let's switch over to Core and take a look. Now, you can easily view the definition of a class. To do that, we're just going to expand the schema branch over here in the project pane. And then I'll click on Classes. You then have a list of all of the classes, and I can select one to view its complete definition. So let's select Requirement. Now, to view the properties of your attributes, your parameters, or relations, you can simply select one. Then right-click on the item of interest and select Attribute Properties. Now here you see a definition of this particular attribute, which is the creation stamp. It tells me what it is. I can see if it's versioned, if it gets locked after it's been set, which tab it appears on the property sheet, and whether or not it's considered essential. Essential attributes can't be removed. We also have some value types, initial values, etc. So there's a lot of information here that can be made available through the schema side. Now you're also going to find diagrams in which you can view the relations between this class and other classes. We have the ER diagram, which starts with the one that you're looking at and just shows you the next level. I really like this view because it shows the grouping. We can see that a requirement specifies a variety of classes here, and that's great to see those groupings where you have multiple target classes of a relation. That's one of my favorite things about this ER diagram. The spider diagram handles it a little bit differently, and it shows each individual relationship. As you can see, this diagram shows that there are a lot of relationships, a lot of interconnectedness between requirements. Now you can use the regular diagram manipulation tools that you see over on the database side to make some changes here. So you can drag things to move them around. You can also hide them. Let's use that hidden tool, and you'll see it just disappeared. So I can create subsets by doing that. It's a really great tool to be able to narrow it down to get the picture that you want to see and the understandings that you're looking for. Now, in the facilities section of the schema, there are several matrices that you'll find helpful. Now, facilities are a subset of classes that enable you to focus on a particular area of interest within the larger schema. Let's take a look at the systems engineering facility. Now, here we see the description of it. Let's take a look at some of the views that are available here, because these are different than any other view you're going to get in Core. The attribute matrix lists each attribute with its usage within each class. So I can see that pretty much every class in this facility has an audit log, but very few of them have an abbreviation, just one, as a matter of fact. The relation matrix helps to find which classes are valid for a particular relationship. So I can see that categorized by is valid for most classes, whereas built from is a more restricted usage. The attribute relation matrix details relationship attributes and the relations for which they are used. So a performs relation, component performs a function, that has an attribute relation, and this kind of thing is what's being captured here. As a matter of fact, if I scroll down to performs, we will find that the third box is marked, which is behavior type, and so we find that there. Now the last area of the schema is perspectives. The perspectives allow you to focus on the aspect of the system model, specifically of an element, that are most relevant to you at the current time. They allow you to specify what attributes and relationships you want to see in an element's property sheet. You can view and define them here. We'll take a quick look at one. So the system context, I see a definition. I see the classes that are included. Now, if you are new to using Core, it may be helpful to turn on the Display Definitions feature. Turning this on will allow you to hover over a class or attribute to view its schema description. To adjust this setting, you'll need to go into User Preferences, click Tools, User Preferences, and Display Definitions is right here. So I'll go ahead and check that. And then when I hover over class, I should get it to pop up. There it is. So I get the description of the class. Again, the same thing will happen when I hover over an attribute. If I hold my mouse still for just a moment, I should be able to get, there it is. The purpose is a brief statement of the reason for the existence. So you can get those to pop up. This is really useful if you're new and you don't want to have to switch out to the schema side to get these definitions on the fly. However, if you are an experienced user, you may find that these get in your way, which is why we allow you to turn it on and off so easily. Now, if you would complete reference of the schema all in one place. Now you need a document to give to somebody. We have provided a schema definition report that you can generate, distribute, or print. To run this report, you'll need to open the Run Script dialog, click Tools, Run Script, and we are looking for the schema definition report. There it is. To get the full schema, remember facilities are subsets of classes. I want everything in this example, so I'll select all classes. Now I do have some options available here if I want to include the attributes, if I want to include all of the parameters, and do I want to include relationship attributes. These are all marked yes by default because we assume you want a full definition. If you want to turn some of these off to streamline and only focus on certain areas, that's available for you right here in this composite prompt. So I'll click OK and save it. Let's just drop this in my output folder. And here it comes. So here we see all of my classes. These are attributes come to all classes, and we start there. So it's a really great description, gives you all of that information from the schema side, something handy, distributable, and printable. Okay, let's switch back to PowerPoint for a minute. Now, I frequently get calls asking me how to change the schema. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment, but first I want to talk about if you should change the schema. Vitech is very conservative with schema changes. We've quite literally spent decades developing our base schema, and we have found that it meets most needs. Still, we can envision a scenario in which you may want or need to change the schema. Let's first talk about the risk involved when you change the schema. Risk enters the situation because we've built many areas of the program based upon our schema. This includes reports, diagrams, perspectives, and facilities. Reports are my biggest concern. Many of our customers love that we provide so many reports that are easy to output. They reference the classes in our schema. If you change the schema, you might break one of those reports. You'll need to have a very good understanding of the reports so that you can assess if a change you make will affect a report. If it does affect a report, you will need to be proficient in Core Script in order to adjust the report. This means that big schema changes are not for a novice core user. So if you shouldn't change the schema, then how do you meet your need? You'll find in many cases you can alias a class. We found that most times a customer wants something like one of our classes, they just want to call it something else. If that is your situation, just enter what you'd like to see it called in the alias field. This screenshot is from the schema side on the requirement class property sheet and shows you right where you can enter the alias. You'll find the alias attribute in most every area of the schema. This includes relations, class attributes, facilities, perspectives, almost anything on the schema side. We can allow you to alias and call whatever you'd like to see it called. Now, when you use an alias, everywhere Core would have shown the original name, it will display the alias instead. And the magic here is that it preserves all of the function that is based upon that class name, specifically all of the function of the reports. Now, if you'd still think you'd like to change the schema, give us a call. We'd be happy to talk it through with you. All customers who are current on maintenance have access to this kind of advice from our team of systems engineers. We'll gladly have a quick chat with you. If your needs are deeper than a quick chat, call us anyway. Our systems engineers would be happy to discuss if engaging in a consulting contract with us is right for you. Now, if you've weighed all your options and you still want to change the schema, there's one more trick I'd like to show you. Let's switch back to Core. Now, we're going to take Core over to Schema mode. So I will click Project, Shift to Schema mode. It's going to give me a little bit of a warning because I'm working with sample data here. I'm not going to bother with the export. If this is your live production data, please export. I'm pretty obsessive about protecting your data. Now this shift allows you to change the schema. Where I was before in database mode, I can view the schema, but I can't change it. That kind of keeps it locked so that we don't make changes without the proper intent. Now let's take a look at classes. Here's the trick. Notice that the schema is structured in a tree. There are abstract classes, a level above the classes that you are used to seeing in Core. So here is the component class, which is what you're used to seeing. Implementation unit is the abstract class above that. Now maybe I need a class that's like components, but I want to keep components separate from these other things. If this is what I'm looking for, then I can just right-click on Implementation Unit and select New Class. I can call it anything I want because we're working with a sample. I'll just call it Class 1. Now I've made a subclass of Implementation Unit that is nearly identical to the component class. It's actually identical to Implementation Unit. It's mostly defined, but not completely. It's going to have the exact same attributes and parameters. Some of the relationship targets will be missing and will need to be filled in later. But now that I've done this, I have a solid foundation, and then I can customize it. This not only gives me a sort of template to build my class from, it also enables some key capabilities in Core. Let's switch over to database mode. Take a look. Now, we'll get to those capabilities in just 1 minute. When you switch back to database mode, Core runs a consistency check on the schema. It found inconsistencies, and it's offering to show me what they are. So let's say yes and open the consistency checker. So I can, if I have more than one inconsistent definition, I'll have a list here. I just have the one. Now it's giving me a list of the problems that it found. I have not fully defined this. If you run into this, take your time. Start at the top and work through these. You can just put this on another screen and work through them beginning to end. My class doesn't have a description. We can see there that it does not. It has a variety of relation targets that have not been defined. Now, through webinar magic, I'm just going to skip this part. And I'm going to open another project that I have finished the schema change on so that we can move forward in our webinar. All right, that came on my other screen. Here we go. Now, notice that we don't see my new class in the Essentials facility. Even though it's like a component, it's not there. I would need to add it to that facility in schema mode if I wanted to see it here. For now, I'll just use the All Classes facility instead. And here is my new class. I'll create a new element. We'll just name it generically. Now let's take a look at the available diagrams. These are exactly the same diagrams that I have available for my component class. This is because diagrams work on the abstract class level. This is hands down for me the top reason to leverage abstract class when creating a new class. Now some, but not all, of our reports will leverage an abstract class as well. We do suggest testing out your schema changes in a sandbox project or maybe a copy of your project, and then running reports and looking at schemas to evaluate the impact. This allows you to kind of test the change before you deploy it in your production data. Now, we'd be happy to discuss with you if you need custom report work. We do offer report contracts where we can help you build those based on the schema changes that you need. Now, there's one more option to changing the schema, and that is the careful selection of the schema you choose to use. Many of you know we have two schemas. We have our base schema, and our DODAF schema. Now, the DODAF schema is an extension of our base. It has every class available in our base schema, plus the specific classes that are added in the DODAF schema. Now, around the office, casually in discussion, we've stopped calling the DODAF schema by its current name. We've started calling it, instead, the Operational Architecture schema. This is because there is a lot of opportunity in the area of modeling operational architecture. A lot of folks are doing it. And we found out that when customers hear DODAF, they immediately think of outputting one of the 52 DODAF views. However, if you have needs in the area of modeling operational architecture, our DODAF schema is really well suited to help you doing that. There's a lot of meat in that schema. So if it's what you need, but more than you need, then you can consider creating a custom perspective. Remember that perspectives define what is displayed on screen, and those are up here. And so you can create a custom perspective that will pare those things down. They'll show you less classes, less attributes, less relations. You can define this on your own. Now that we've fully discussed changing your schema, you save it as a template for use in other projects. We've set that up pretty easily for you. You just simply click File, Export, Core Data File. Now I'm going to change this export here to Project Schema. This is just going to give me the schema model, the facilities perspectives, and storage views. This will create an XML file that contains only the schema. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that since exports are pretty straightforward, and we'll switch back to PowerPoint to cover just a few more topics. The next thing I want to talk about are common changes that are of minimal risk. I just talked about changing or adding a perspective. These are of minimal risk if you choose to do that. Facilities as well, changing or adding those are minimal risk. Adding in general is less risky than deleting or changing, but you need to note that our reports may not pick up things that are new. If you're looking for a specific attribute, some reports will pick up all attributes. Some reports are looking for specific ones and they won't pick up the new things. So it's really dependent on the kind of change that you make and the nature of your reporting needs. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed I've not talked about parameters yet. Parameters are interesting in that they're in between. Once you define a parameter, they are part of your schema. Once they're defined, if you want to edit them, you have to go into schema mode to do that. However, to initially define a parameter, you can do that from the database side. So it's important to know that they become the schema once defined, but we've opened it up with more flexibility to allow you to define them on the fly. That's one of the very reasons you'd use parameters, because maybe it's kind of like an attribute, but maybe every component doesn't necessarily have this thing. It's a great use for parameters. So they're in between, and I wanted to take a moment to chat about those and mention that. And that wraps up everything I had prepared for you today. Katie, I'm sure you have a couple of questions for me.
I do. Thank you very much. The first question that I have is from Ronald, and he's asking, is it possible to extend the schema to decompose classes? For example, can we decompose function into its constituent verb and noun and be able to make relationships from these to other classes?
Great question, Ron. I want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. So I have a function class, and maybe you're wanting to divide it into different kinds of functions. If that is the case, I actually would not recommend creating new classes. We have type attributes on the function class that you might leverage to do that. Additionally, you may choose to utilize folders inside of the function class. Let me switch over to Core and show you the use of folders. I got the wrong one. There we go. So we see here in the function class, I've got a variety of folds here. folders here. And you can utilize these to keep those separate. You can also utilize type attributes on most classes as well. So those are some options. Could you create subclasses to functions? Yes, you could. Can you create the similar and same relationships? Yes, you could. Again, the level of impact on your reports would need to be evaluated.
Okay, he also wrote back and said not types of functions, but the constituent elements of a function as named. And he's got verb-noun.
I'm not sure I entirely follow you here, Ron. I'm going to need to follow up with you offline about that one. I'll make it a point to call you later today.
Okay, sounds good. I've got a couple more questions. He says, okay, thanks. And let's see. So next question I have is from Andy, and he's asking, what do the various types mean?
Great question, Andy. This is probably coming from classes that have types, such as requirements. I believe components also have types, so here they are. This can actually be a little bit flexible and can vary by team. Now, because requirement types specifically do have an impact on the reporting and how our formal documents work, I have provided a list of our thoughts on that in the knowledge base inside the My Support section of our website. If you're on this webinar, then you got into My Support in order to register, so look for the knowledge base, and we do have an article on requirement types. Again, remember those are suggestions, and the information I list there is based upon the impact on reporting. In other things, classes such as the component class, that doesn't have such an impact on reports, and we do have basically flexibility for your team to define that and to agree on that. You can then capture those defined usage inside the schema through the description attribute on the types.
All right, thank you. Got one more question. Question from Rachel. She's asking, I started my project in the base schema, but now I feel like I need to switch to DODAF. How would I do that?
Thanks for asking that, Rachel. Switching from base to DODAF is pretty easy. Remember I said that the DODAF schema includes every class in our base schema and then has many more. So switching from base to DODAF naturally works well. You create a new project in the DODAF schema. You can do that right here, project, new project, define your schema. So I would select this DODAF option. And then I create the new blank project and then import my project in. This is going to put all of those elements in the same classes they were in before. At that point, you'll want to take a look at your project and decide if some of your existing elements need to move into one of the newer classes that was extended in the DODAF schema. Now, moving the other way is not as easy. If you have the DODAF schema and you want to go back to base, you're going to have a lot of classes that don't exist in our base schema. So you should really call our support desk to chat about that. Can it be done? Why, yes, it can. Might it be painful? That is entirely dependent on what classes you're using. If you're only using the base classes, I can get it in. If you're using some of the DODAF specific classes, then we'll need to massage that just a little bit in order to get that switched back over. That's definitely something to call support for if you're going from DODAF to base. But base to DODAF, super easy.
All right, thank you so much. If you have any additional questions that you think of as you're working through this information on your own, please feel free to message our support desk, and I believe, yes, the contact information is up on the screen for you. And you can also post comments on our LinkedIn group page. If you go to linkedin.com and search for Vitech Corporation, you'll be able to find our group page that is monitored, and we will respond as quickly as possible to any questions that you may have there. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Please keep an eye on your inbox for more webinar invitations over the next few weeks. We also keep our online calendars updated with our upcoming webinars on our website. And today, at the conclusion of this webinar, a survey should open on your screen. We'd appreciate it if you took a moment to give us some feedback on today's presentation or to let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars. That is all for today, and thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.